Funding for this program is made possible by Burke Nursery and Garden Center in Burke, Virginia. You'll find trees and shrubs, perennials and annuals, water garden supplies, houseplants, and bird and gardening supplies. Burke Nursery also provides landscape, plant diagnostic, and installation services, and much more. For more information, you can check out their website or call 703-323-1188. Welcome to Gardening with Burke Nursery, the show where we help you grow your garden, increase the curb appeal of your yard, and share information on all plants. I'm your host, Misty Kuceris, the horticulturalist at Burke Nursery and Garden Center. People are always asking me what herbs to buy, what herbs to plant, where to plant the herbs, and any other herb-related questions. The good news about herbs is that you can plant them in your garden bed, you can plant them in pots, you can place them on your deck, or you can even bring them into your home. Now today, I am focusing on herb gardening, the container approach. So a lot of my friends actually have small little condos, they have patio gardens, they have deck gardens, and even in my case, the sunniest spot in my home is actually on my deck, which is fine because my deck is also right outside my kitchen. So what I do is I plant all my herbs in pots. It's too far of a walk for me when I'm cooking to run out to the garden because I always forget which herbs. It doesn't matter how much I've set up my little cooking station, there's always an herb I've forgotten that I have to go outside and get. The other thing too about herbs is you can plant them individually in their own little pots and just spread the pots throughout the deck, or you can even, if you want, put the pots in your garden. But to me, what's really fun is when I get together with a couple of my other gardening friends and we decide to have an herb potting party. What that means is that we decide on the theme that we want for the pot. Then, based on the theme, we choose our herbs. And that's what I'm going to share with you today. At least two of my favorite themes when it comes to herbs in a pot. Now, right here are the herbs that we're going to start with this pot. And this pot, the theme is what I like to call the teapot or a little tea garden. So all of these herbs are herbs that work when you want to have tea. But before I get into that, let me first put on my gloves. And also this particular pot, and a lot of these flat pots that I tend to use don't have drainage holes. So what I do when they don't have drainage holes to make sure that the herbs will get the appropriate drainage is I put drainage rocks at the base. And drainage rocks can either be marble chips or they can be pea gravel. As a matter of fact, what drainage rocks look like, they look about anywhere from about an inch to half an inch to an inch, and they just go at the base. So what happens when you water this, the water goes down to the bottom, it collects a little bit, and then the soil starts wicking the water back up. And that's how it works with drainage rocks. So just leave those there as a little design. And then the potting mix is your standard potting mix. I do not like to use potting mix that has any type of moisture retention because herbs are primarily from the Mediterranean. While they like moisture a little bit, they also like to dry out a little bit. So that means that once you plant them, you keep an eye on when it's going to rain. And if it doesn't rain, then you may need to water them. But often nature will take its course. So the first herb that I like in a teapot is the lemon verbena. And lemon verbena, or verbena if you want to pronounce it, is not quite the same as lemon balm. Lemon verbena has a very mild lemony taste. And to my palate, the lemon balm is really more of, to me, it has a bitter aftertaste. So I find that it's not one of my favorites. The other thing about the lemon balm, the lemon verbena, is that it is an herb that is an aromatic, meaning that it works when you want to do aromatherapy. And what I like to do when I've just had one of those days is to just pluck a leaf and then let that aroma just come in my direction. And then what I like to do is take the leaf and just bruise it. And as I bruise it, I can just smell the aroma of that lemon coming right up. And in addition to working as a tea, it also is great in place of regular lemon. So I put it on fish. I'm a pescatarian, so in honesty, I don't eat meat, but my friends that are meat eaters, they put it on their chicken. They really like the taste of that. Or you can put it in salads, wherever you want. In tea, though, you can either use it in tea as either the bruised leaves. What I recommend is you boil it, then bruise the leaves, put the leaves in the boiling water, and then you steep it. I tend to steep it for about 10 minutes, maybe 15. You can also put in dry lemon verbena if you want to make your tea. Then I would leave it longer, about 20 minutes or so. There's also suggestions that you don't do what is known as sun tea when it comes to herbs that you haven't washed. And I mean, you wash them lightly, but if they're not dry, if they're fresh off the vine, you're better off to just boil the water versus doing the sun tea, which means using the sunlight to create the heat of the pot. So the other thing is that when I look at where I want to plant it, I decide that I want to plant this in the center of my pot. The reason is that lemon verbena in Northern Virginia, where I live, may be an annual, but if I were south of Virginia, it is a perennial, and it is a shrub. So in this area, mine usually grow to about 2 feet tall, 1 foot spread, but if you were south of here, you would get a 4 foot by 4 foot shrub. And then with any small plant that you're going to plant, loosen the roots. And I happen to like the trowels that are 1 or 2 inch width versus the larger trowels or the wider trowels for pots. And this is the one that I use when I'm out in the garden. And so I am just going to plant this in the center. Now, the next plant that I like is the mint. And the mint, this mint is really cool. This is chocolate peppermint or peppermint chocolate, whichever way they do the tag. And it really does, if you were to take a bit, if you were to taste it, it tastes like a peppermint patty. It really has that chocolate taste. And I think that is so neat as far as a tea. There are other mints, and so I brought along some to show you. So the mints here, for example, this mint, this is called Kentucky, or this is called Kentucky kernel, but there's also julep, there's also derby, and these are the mints that you use for your mint julep. Then this mint is spearmint, and spearmint is considered the favorite, and we all know, well, maybe not we all, but if you were a young kid and you liked chewing gum, a lot of the chewing gum was spearmint. This here, I have not tried, so I can't tell you how I'd feel about this one, but this one is pineapple mint. And I mean, it definitely, you can smell the pineapple. Taste-wise, again, I haven't tried it, but any of these will make wonderful tea. And you do the same type of process in making your tea that you would with the lemon verbena. Now this, believe it or not, this is a mint. It's a ground cover mint, Corsican. It is not a culinary mint, but if you put it between stepping stones or put it in a rock garden, but well, not so much in a rock garden because you may not be walking your rock garden, but if you're walking on your stepping stones, then you actually will smell the mint as you're walking. You release that mint with your foot or your feet or one foot. So back to the mint. Now, this is important. It's when you're planting mint, whether you're planting it in the ground or you're planting it in the pot, you need to be very careful. All mint can be invasive. It just has a phenomenal root structure and just will take over. If I were to plant this mint out of the pot into the larger pot here, it would eventually take over, and it doesn't play well literally in the sandbox, or in this case, the tea box. So what I do and I like mint as a tea, so of course I'm going to put it in my little tea garden. Just take the tag out. I will just take my little space, and I am going to plant this in a corner. The reason some of the mint, like this mint here, the mint julep, the spearmint, the pineapple mint, those are all upright. But this chocolate peppermint is a creeping one. So I am going to plant it right in the corner, and I'm planting it totally in its pot. I am not taking it out of the pot at all. I am just putting it in the pot. Oh, and by the way, I put this too close to the center, the lemon verbena. So it's okay to pick up your plants and move them over a little bit if you need to set the space up differently. Otherwise, I'm not going to fit this in here. Oh, and if you could smell the chocolate, I mean, you really can smell the peppermint. And then I'm just moving over here because I need a little more soil. This is another reason these skinny ones are so good, because I can get to the edge here. And there, people aren't even going to know that there is a pot within a pot. Love it. And what's neat is if you have kids, I mean, you can work with your children or your grandchildren or your nieces and nephews. Like I said, I like to have friends come over, and we like to have garden pot parties. And then the next one that I'm going to plant, and you can see how it's hanging over, is stevia. Now, stevia, a lot of people never heard of stevia for years and years and years. And suddenly, everybody hears about it. We used to get stevia at the nursery, and it kind of sold, kind of didn't. Well, now we can't keep it in stock. Why? Stevia is a phenomenal substitute for sugar. It doesn't give the glucose sugar spike that actual sugars do, or that some of the other sugar substitutes do. So people with diabetes can actually take a look and confirm with their doctor whether or not stevia could be used as a substitute for a sweetener for them. The other is that this stevia already is getting some blossoms. And in honesty, what you want to do if you start getting blossoms on your stevia, pretty as it looks, you really want to cut the blossoms off. You don't want the blossoms. The blossoms actually pull the sugar out of the leaves, and the leaves are where you get your sugar. 1 leaf equals 2 teaspoons of sugar. So this time, I am going to plant my stevia. And this is not invasive, so that means I can take it out of the pot. And this is actually root bound. See how the roots are just tied around there? So especially when it's root bound, you definitely want to make certain that you have the roots loosened. And a little bit of the soil will fall out when the roots are loosened. And that's all right. This time, I'm going to plant this in this corner. The other thing too, some of you may say, wait a minute, that pot looks awfully shallow. Well, when you're doing these types of pots, and this is a pot that is intended to be in the house, although I could leave it outside, but this one I'm bringing in the house because I want to get to my teas faster. It does need to be in a bright spot of your house or under a grow light, but I can, if I want, which is what I'm doing, is open up the roots so that basically it looks like I've gone halfway up with those roots. And I'm doing that so that I can fit it wonderfully in this pot. And my final herb that I'm putting in my little tea garden here is chamomile. And chamomile makes a phenomenally good tea. Of course, this, I thought the stevia was root bound. This one, you can see the roots coming out. So sometimes, and I can't do it here because I don't want to get water all over, but sometimes if the plant is root bound, what I'll do is I'll actually soak, if it has the holes, I'll soak it in water so that that makes it easier to get out of the pot. The other thing I'll do in this case is I'll poke at the holes from the base, and that will get it out of the pot. And as you can see, it is extremely root bound. But again, not to worry. So once again, I will open up the roots. And again, because I'm using what I call a shallow pot, I'm moving the roots. I mean, you could probably see it this way. See how the roots are spread out that way? And then I'm just going into the pot. Now, the one thing about chamomile is with chamomile, what you want to do is you're actually going, it's the flowers that you use for the tea. You don't use the leaves for the tea. So just keep that in mind, that it's the flowers. So with the stevia, I didn't want that to flower, but with the chamomile, I am looking for it to flower. Again, need to add a little more soil. Now, I'm not going to do this because this teapot is just the way I want it. It has the chocolate mint. It has the stevia, which will also grow tall. Like I said, please, if you want that sugar essence, remove the flowers when they start forming. And then with the chamomile, that's almost like a little bushy thing, and that you definitely want the flowers. If I wanted, I could also use lavender. A lot of people forget that lavender can be a culinary herb, especially your sweet lavender, and it can be used in any type of cooking where you, especially drinks, but it's also a potpourri. And if I wanted, I could put it here, but I don't want it in this pot. And I do want to show you that there's 2 types of lavender. We have the sweet lavender, which is the traditional lavender. And then The other lavender is the French lavender, fringed French to be exact. And the leaves have little fringes. They both have the same essences. They're very similar. It's just more physical looks, although I do feel that the sweet lavender is a little deeper in its scent. So there is teapot. I had so much fun planting that tea garden that one of the things I looked up and realized I'm beginning to run out of time for this show. And I still want to talk to you about planting an Italian garden. So I'll talk about it, but I'm not going to take the time to plant it. Instead, what is in an Italian garden? Well, oh, by the way, this is the pot that I will be using when I get home so that I can plant my Italian garden. And like the other pot, has no drainage holes, so I do have the drainage rocks in here. And like the other garden, I'm also using regular potting mix. The first herb is my favorite, and that is basil. And there's so many different types of basil. So I'd like to show you the different types and explain the difference. This here is sweet basil. Sweet basil is just what it says. It has that hint of pepper, that hint of anise that you see in basil, but there's a sweetness to it. And this is the basil that is used in pesto when you're making pesto. It is not Genovese basil. They are very similar. Genovese basil is actually a cultivar from the sweet basil and cultivated to have a heavier, deeper, peppery taste to it. Now, a favorite that I just discovered is the amethyst basil. And the amethyst basil is named for its color. It is just like the sweet basil in taste. And then we always have the Thai basil. This is an intense basil. Very peppery, very anisey, very, very, very spicy. Nice in salads. I actually like it in salads because it gives you almost that arugula taste that you get in a salad. And then another fairly new one for me is the variegated basil. And this variegated basil has the taste of lemon with the pepper. And it doesn't flower as profusely as the other basils, so that the leaves actually retain their taste and their lemony flavor a lot longer than the other basils. And usually, there's a couple exceptions, but usually with herbs, when they flower, they start losing their oils and they start losing that taste. Another that I always like in an Italian garden is parsley. And there are two types of parsley. There is the Italian parsley, which is what this is. It's also known as flat leaf parsley because the leaves are flat. And then there's the curly leaf parsley. I personally, when I saw it as a little kid on the plates, it's a palate cleanser, but I always found it bitter. So I am not a fan of the curly parsley. I know some people are, and it's still a good culinary herb, but give me the flat parsley any day. And then you can either put both in your Italian garden, or you can put one or the other. And what am I talking about? I'm talking about oregano. That's on my left. Marjoram is on my right. Very similar. And in point of fact, a lot of what you think is oregano may not be oregano. So vulgari, Originum vulgari is the true oregano, that deep, deep taste. Marjoram is a milder version. Excellent. Both are really, really good. So whichever herb you prefer, or both, they work really nice in that Italian garden. And then, of course, we have chives. And chives are just what they say. They are your onion taste. They are your, uh, they give that special robustness to anything that you do with the Italian garden. So those are some of the plants that you would put in your Italian garden. Well, I always have a lot of fun when I'm planting herbs, especially herb pots with themes. And as I already mentioned, I often have at least one friend come over and we plant these pots together. And we try to come up with themes, whether it's a teapot or for those of you that eat meat, there's a meat pot that you can do, whatever you want to create. I hope this show has inspired you to plant more herbs. If you have any questions about herbs or gardening in general, just email me at misty@burkenursery.com. I'm your host, Misty Kuceris. Thank you for spending your time with me here at Gardening with Burke Nursery. I'm looking forward to helping you grow your garden.
Funding for this program is made possible by Burke Nursery and Garden Center in Burke, Virginia. You'll find trees and shrubs, perennials and annuals, water garden supplies, houseplants, and bird and gardening supplies. Burke Nursery also provides landscape, plant diagnostic, and installation services, and much more. For more information, you can check out their website or call 703-323-1188.